In this video, we're going to go back to browxy.com because we're going to be looking at something which is pure Java and not really to do with Android specifically. Having said that, we're going to use what we're about to learn in Android to download some web content, and we'll use the same structure in lots of the lectures and projects throughout the course. Try and catch might sound like a fun ball game, but actually it's a way of stopping our app from crashing if it experiences an error. So let's jump straight in and see how it works. So click try next to Hello World to get our basic Hello World code, which you should remember from the first few videos, and then just run that code, clicking start, and you can see we get the output Hello World. Great. So now I'm going to give you a couple of very small challenges, and the first is to create an integer array which has room for 3 different objects. So an integer array that has room for 3 different numbers. Remember, it's an array, not an array list. So see if you can remember how to do that. Go for it. I hope you managed it. To create an integer array, we use int and then the square brackets to show that we want an array. And then I'll call it array, but of course you can call it whatever you like. And then this is going to be a new integer array, and we're going to specify that it has room for 3 numbers, like that. So remember, an array is different to an array list because it has a fixed number of items in it, whereas an array list, we can have as many different items as we want. All right, I'll forgive you if you didn't remember that because we haven't used arrays since we first met them back in chapter 3. This next bit though should be fine. Can you create a for loop which sets the values of the 3 integers in our array to 0, 1, and 2 respectively? Go for it. Okay, hope you managed that one. So we're going to use a for loop, and in our for loop we're going to create an integer I, which is initially going to be 0. We're going to keep going as long as I is less than 3. You could have used less than or equal to 2 there, but I'll go for the possibly simpler option of less than 3. And we're going to increase I each time. So I plus plus. Then we use our curly brackets to contain our for loop, and we're just going to set array I equal to I. Simple as that. And then just to make sure that it's worked, I'm going to use system.out.println, and to print that to the console, we're going to need to convert it to a string, which we do with arrays.toString, and then our array. So that just converts the array to a string so we can view it in the console. In order for that to work, we're going to need to import the arrays package. So that's import java.util.arrays. Okay, let's take a look. We should now see our array is filled with 0, 1, 2. Fantastic. So all well and good so far, all fairly straightforward. What if, for some reason in our code, we've decided to try and add 4 items into this integer array? Now, obviously, that's not going to work because we only allowed 3. So let's just see what happens if we run our code now. We get what's known as an exception, which is essentially just an error in our code. And if we got this in one of our Android apps, the whole app would crash, which is really the one user experience we want to avoid at all costs. So obviously the best solution for that is to not get the error in the first place, but there are some cases in which we can't guarantee that we won't get an error. If, for example, we try and download some information from the internet and the user doesn't have their internet connection up and running, we're going to get an exception. We don't want our app to crash just because that happens. So this is where try and catch come in. And the way it works is quite simple. We take a try, and then we put curly brackets around the code that we want to try. So we are literally trying out this code, and we accept that there's a chance that this may fail. So what we then do is catch the exception. So catch the error, essentially. And we normally put it like that. So catch, and then we create a variable of a type of exception. So exception with a capital E, and then we normally call the exception little e to keep things simple. And then what we then do is put our code that we want to happen if we get an error in here. So for now, we'll just print it to the console. So system.out.print line E. There we go. So let's run that now. And you can see I've got a separate error. Maybe you spotted that. I actually put my try curly brackets around the whole thing rather than just the for loop. Thought I'd leave that in because some of you might have done that. There we go. So you can see that what's happened now is that we've printed our error just there, but crucially the app hasn't crashed. We haven't actually had an exception because we caught the exception. And in this case, we just printed it to the logs, but we could have done something there. We could have alerted the user to something that went wrong if, for example, they didn't have their internet connection. So the most important thing is that our app hasn't crashed, but we've also been able to alert the user to a problem, and hopefully they can change whatever it is about their system that caused that problem in the first place. So this try catch system is really useful when you're doing things in your apps that you know have a chance of failing, like downloading content from the internet, as we'll be doing in the next lecture. One last thing I'd like to show you is that you can catch specific exceptions as well. Rather than just catching a generic exception, you could catch the specific exception that we're getting here, which is this array index out of bounds exception. So if you want to catch a specific exception, then you use, oops, not there, array index out of bounds exception. So that would then catch that specific exception, and then if you wanted, you could have a general catch exception there that just caught any other exception that you hadn't anticipated. So for this one we could say index out of bounds, like that. Whoops. Try spelling bounds right. So then we've caught that specific exception, but we still have a backup in case there was another problem that we didn't foresee. But the show does go on, and the script or our app will keep on running even though we've had an exception in our code here. So that's what we use try and catch for. In the next lecture, we'll apply that directly when we try and download some content from the web. See you there.